rand trading around 768, so some weakness coming through this morning. Of course, a lot better than we were looking a week ago, but still some weakness and some uncertainty in these markets. Of course, we do have those public holidays in the United States and the UK today, so trade expects to be relatively thin.
Very mute this morning. We're seeing a small bit of imported demand, and of course with the UK and the US off, we're not seeing the levels or the flow that we have seen in the last few days, in any case, into the equity markets. And also the euro trending a little bit weaker on the back of Spain's downgrade and just general concerns around the debt crisis there, all sort of coming together to move the rand slightly weaker this morning.
Of course, that Spanish downgrade by Fitch followed a similar downgrade for Spain, Portugal and Greece about a month ago. There's now some concern that France could be at risk of a downgrade. Do you think that's likely? And if so, what would the impact on the markets be of that?
Stephen, I think rating agencies are going to be very, very cautious going forward. You know, they missed the entire sort of subprime crisis by months, but some would say by years, as they kept giving these debt instruments AAA ratings. I think they're going to be very, very cautious, very, very conservative, and I think anybody that is afflicted by a debt pile to try to stimulate the economies is going to be under threat of a downgrade. Whether France is actually affected, one has to see. I think all the sovereign states around the world, those with high debt ratios, are very, very cognizant and conscious of the fact that they've got to do something about it. And we have seen a lot of austerity measures put into place, which of course is going to have implications for growth worldwide.
David, your view on the rand at these levels, just below R7.70. Of course, we are looking pretty firm against the euro and the pound, so it's not all doom and gloom. And on a trade-weighted basis, we must be looking pretty strong.
Yeah, not surprising that we've done so well against the euro, Stephen, but you know, I think there's more risks associated to being long of emerging markets at this point in time. I think the world is a long, long way from in a healthy state, and I think anything could tip us over the edge. I think there's many sort of amber warning lights floating on the horizon, and I wouldn't be rushing in at this point in time to be long rand, to be short of dollars. I think one would have to be very, very cautious. The strength that we did see bringing the rand down from 8 last week was largely on the back of the Morgan Stanley Emerging Markets Index that reweighted South Africa. We did see a lot of inflow from that. Various other rumors emanating, and I think just in general the market was caught very long of dollars on the back of export supply towards the 8 level. At these levels, I'm a little bit cautious, but certainly in the 750s and 740s, I certainly wouldn't be long of rand and short of foreign currency.
Well, just taking a look at some of the data we've been getting out locally. We had that money supply and credit data out this morning. Private sector credit extension down by 0.9% year on year in April, and really driven, it looks like, by a fall in corporate credit demand, and that's really been vulnerable for the past year, hasn't it?
Well, you know, we've certainly on the money supply front, we've been in a much healthier state than our developed peers. They've been pumping liquidity into their economies, and it just seems that there's not a lot of demand or not a lot of credit demand and money supply demand coming from the local economy. And I guess that's why we're seeing the rand perform so well against the likes of the euro and the pound, as they've amounted to simply, certainly in the UK's instance and the US, they've really printed the money on the back of their quantitative easing programs. So not surprising that the rand has done well, but I think the international factors are going to come into play. I think the negative influences that we're seeing there are indeed flashing a little bit of warning signs for the rand.
Well, just taking a look a little bit ahead, we're expecting trade figures out pretty soon, and we also have PMI and car sales coming out this week. Now, we had some pretty positive data out last week. We had those growth figures for the first quarter last Monday. We also had consumer inflation data that was a bit better than expected. Do you think we can expect to see the positive data flow continuing?
Yeah, I think the economy is doing well. Whether that filters through into positive trade flow is debatable, Stephen. What we have seen historically is when the South African economy does well, certainly our imports pick up and our trade balance deteriorates together with the current account deficit. We haven't quite seen that filtering through yet, and I guess it's a matter of time before that happens. But really, the question for me is whether the global recovery and indeed here in South Africa, and I guess for the government as well and for the financial authorities, is whether this recovery creates the jobs necessary on a sustainable basis. We haven't seen that globally yet, and hence my concern for what's happening around the world.
Well, David, you seem to think that the rand's pretty vulnerable at these levels. Given the flows that we had last week, which propped it up. What would you expect going forward from here? Do you think we're going to continue weakening from these levels?
I think on a trade-weighted basis, Stephen, we may see the rand. I'm not expecting a huge amount of weakness, certainly not during the World Cup. And I think the positive sentiment might, in fact, do something good for inflow, for currency inflow. But I just think on a macro basis, the risks at this point in time are fairly evident, and I think they far outweigh the positive factors. And I am advising caution, particularly when the rand gets close to 750 or indeed into the 740s. 770 and 780 and upwards to 8, we are seeing some export supply, and I guess for the foreseeable future, the rand's going to be trapped in that range around 750 to 8. And we'll just have to see how developments pan out globally for some future direction.